How are you?
Yeah, really good, man. Yeah, nice and busy, keeping myself busy, which is good.
Are these challenging times?
For sure. I think it's so unprecedented, and it's really hard to know what's happening, day by day, let alone week by week,
Sure.
especially in New Zealand. We for a while we were free from lockdown for about 3 months, and then suddenly there was a case in the community and all plans got pushed. I had a video which I was going to film, and that was a week before we were about to film, and that happened previously when the first lockdown happened. It was the same video and we planned to film, and then a week before COVID happened. So it's definitely a crazy time. It's hard to not make music, but release and do anything really.
Sure. Well, before we get into the new singles and kind of music that you've been working on the last couple of years, I'd like to jump back way to the beginning because I read that you started writing around age 14. You picked up the piano. Do you remember what the first song was that you started writing? Do you remember what it was about?
Yeah, it was a track I first started recording as well. God, it's quite cringe looking back and thinking about your old music, especially at 14.
Sure.
Very situational stuff about friends and, what you think is your first heartbreak.
Well, the reason why I ask is because obviously you're much further down the road now, but can you see kind of the spark or kind of, can you see what you wanted to do back then kind of come to fruition now? Totally.
I remember picking up a keyboard, and I was at a holiday house, our family's holiday house, and there was nothing to do there, but you had to make do with what was there. And I picked up a keyboard, and I remember just bashing notes which were in the wrong key, wrong anything. I didn't know how to play keys. To Florence and the Machine, Dog Days Are Over. And I remember just feeling that song and just being like, how awesome. It's such a good track. And it was one of the first tracks which I was like, I want this feeling forever. I want this euphoria, all the time. Well,
that's an interesting thing to say, because what did being creative, what did making music, what that form of expression, what did that do for you? What did that allow you to do, so to say?
To me, this is getting a bit philosophical already, but to me it was an out-of-body experience. Okay. It was something beyond. I'm further chasing that, I think, is and that's probably coming down to my favorite part, which is writing and creating those few days and those few sessions. It's just awesome. Just when you find something which just fits right and searching for that, it's kind of like a puzzle, I guess. But it can go so many ways, and it's awesome writing. I just love it.
So was it around that early point then that you thought, okay, I'm going to go study the piano. This is I've made up my mind. This is what I'm doing.
No, little did I know. It was probably till I was about 17 where really I was taking it more seriously. I remember my mum telling me I was quite like a drama kid. I wanted to be an actor when I was very young, like 5 or so. Sure. And I remember mum asking, do you want to be a musician? I was like, no, it's such hard work. It's too hard. And it came back to bite me, I think.
Well, it is interesting that you're at that early of an age, because I think one of the big misconceptions about being in the music industry is how much work it entails. So at least you knew that already.
Some reason, deep down, maybe it was my past life. I don't know.
No, because that's what I hear from musicians, that it can be very difficult and exhausting.
Sure, it is. It is. It's a long road, but you have to have the ambition, I think, and
Well, what is that ambition for you then? What is, and again, this might be a bit grandiose or whatever, but what do you want to accomplish kind of in a way with what you're doing?
You can ask any creative and I'm sure they'll come back and say, I don't know. I think I'm getting to the point where I'm definitely playing with my motivations, and I'm understanding what motivates me to write. And yeah, it's I don't know if it's necessarily healthy, but it's like, I think it's important to know how you create and why you create. And I think I'm probably beginning to understand for me, it's about expression and self-expression. And so, if I have stuff that I want to say and feel like I can't say, then I use writing as like a diary or a technique to do that. And it just so happens that I then have to share it with the world.
Well, about that then, was that initially, was that a daunting thing to do? Because I can imagine nobody knows who I am, nobody cares, so, and I like it that way. But as an artist, you kind of have to put yourself out there. You have to be vulnerable. So what was that like initially? It's
exhausting. Release time is, friends ask me during release week, like, how are you going? And I'm like, yeah, like, it's probably, for me, it's the most exhausting week. I remember reading a article of Angel Olsen, an incredible writer, and she was saying, like, release time is just so, yeah. And I completely, each track I release, it gets better. It feels easier, but I hope it's a time factor as well, and I'm getting more and more confident with everything I make. So, and I'm more sure of it.
Yeah, that confidence then, where does that arise from? Because you've released an EP before, you've had some trial and error with what kind of music you wanted to make. Do you feel now that you're have a better understanding of what type of music you want to make?
Actually, quite the opposite. Okay. I think I'm actually getting to the point where I'm experimenting more at the moment. EP coming up is a huge mix. Working with Ian, the co-producer, and I came in with very strong ideas of what I wanted for each track, and I think that is something that will stick with me throughout my career and won't change. Is that every song has a particular sound and particular vision, and that's what I love about writing, is that for me it is very flexible, and I like to access different parts of myself and different experiences in life. And I don't think for me it's all the same. I can't understand how you can, make an album that all sounds the same to me, because I feel like when you do that once, you don't need to do it again. But that's just me by accident, I think.
And is it fair to say that when it comes to what you just mentioned, that there's also an element of emphasis on the aesthetics of it? Like you say, it's not just the music, but it's kind of the aesthetics around it. Because, and I wrote the people down, Charlotte Evans and Andrew Blackman, who have helped you with all of this. How important is that to get the right kind of aesthetic for what you're doing?
It's awesome. And I think I'm at this awesome period of my career where I'm able to still experiment and see what works. And it's the beauty of working with, for example, Charlotte. I was so honored to work with her. She's my favorite New Zealand director. And when she, got back to me and said I'd love to, and she loved the music, I was just blown away, and we just chatted over ideas. And I think for me, the visuals are so important because it shapes the atmosphere of the way you listen to it. It's hugely important. It gives the context, I think.
Now let's jump into two of the songs. So you did manage to film a video despite all the craziness going on. So let's start with the beginning point of that song, because you said you kind of have a vision of and kind of an idea of what that needs to be. What was it with this particular song?
The song I wrote like nearly 2 years ago now, and for me it was a really emotional song of having a dream about someone and not knowing how to tell them how, I had a dream about this guy I had only just met and that we were married, and I was like, fuck, how on earth do you tell someone that? It's so intense, but the dream was so intense, and the feelings it happened very quickly, and that was my expression for that. And I actually approached Charlotte with a different song, and then to do a video for, which will be my next single. And what happened was COVID happened, and it was a week out from filming, and we were like, fuck, we're going to lockdown. Everything's hectic, and we get into lockdown, and I approached Charlotte saying I'm releasing this other song. And she said, I would love to do a video for this during lockdown. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, you want to work with me during lockdown, during this hectic time, and you want to make a video? And her concept was like, yeah, we're going to hit up all these cinematographers around the world, and we're going to get all this awesome footage of just the isolation and capture this moment in time, which may not happen again, and yeah, it was really cool to be a part of that by someone that I was so inspired by, Yeah, it was a huge honor, really.
Sure, I can imagine. And then, I mean, that dream that you had, did you kind of, well, probably not immediately because you're still drowsy, but did you kind of have an idea, well, this can turn into a song? Because I do think you said that you wrote a couple of lines down immediately, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was great chatting with Ian when we got to the production, because I sat on it as a ballad. I sat on it as a stripped back keys, because that's how I wrote, is it on the keyboard, and I couldn't find a way to really make it fit. I had so many different ideas, and it was going different ways, and it could be more pop, it could be more stripped back and acoustic. That's the hard thing I think about working alone, and that's why I worked with Ian. Is I sent him the demos, and he got them, and he was, I would love to work with you. We don't need to change the writing. We can just go into it. And there was a great thing about working with Ian, is because I said, I want it to sound, and I'd give him words. And then when we began recording that track, it was a rainy, cold day in England in November, and it was raining outside and the birds were chirping. And I went outside to have a bit of fresh air, because it's really intense being in the studio. Sure. And I went outside, and I just had this breath of fresh air, and these birds were chirping, and it's in his countryside house, and it was just so beautiful. And I said, let's get the microphone and record this. And we recorded the birds and the rain all together. Okay. And that's what began the track. And from there, we added these textures of reverse guitar and ukulele. I brought my ukulele over from New Zealand to the UK. And he was like, yeah, I want this ukulele. You show me all the demos with this ukulele, and we have to have it on the project. Mm. And so I was like, okay. So we recorded that, and that's some of the textures underlying it, and it just developed through there, really.
Right. And when it comes to the because I seem to remember that retrospect your previous EP you did kind of by yourself. You produced, and so now you have this other person working with you. Was that kind of did it give you a sense of freedom in a way where you didn't have to worry about that side of the music, and you didn't have to figure out, okay, now it's time to stop tinkering, that kind of stuff?
Totally. That's completely it. I think it got to the point where as a writer, a producer, and I was doing vocals on this EP, and it just got to the point where I was in my own head too much, and I thought, I can't find a direction. I know what I want it to sound like, but how do I get there? How I needed someone to just collaborate with and bounce off. And I think that's so important in a creative environment, is to have, there's people to bounce off and to give you the energy. I think otherwise you can just, for me, I was becoming this black hole of just these songs aren't good enough. And I forgot how proud I am of them. And working with Ian just really emphasized that to me. And it was my first project where I focused on my vocals, and I was quite intimidated working with him, because he's worked with Paloma Faith and Amy Winehouse and big voices, and it was freaky. But he was awesome, and he really gave me some confidence in my voice, and that was part of it as well. It was cool. Right.
And now looking towards the EP then, the new EP, what do you hope, because you said it's quite eclectic, and there's, I think, 2 songs out right now. What do you hope that people take away from it? Is this for you somewhat of an introduction to people who might not know you yet?
Yeah, I think it probably remind people with each different release how eclectic my writing can be. And that's really cool. I think for me, it was a journey of like, love and summer love and that gradual distance, and then kind of things turning toxic. And to me, I think it's a story which some people can relate to. Summer love is so, it can be fleeting, that's why they call it summer love. And yeah, I think from that, I want people to understand that there's a lot of meaning behind it. And it's not just being like, what sounds good. To me, there's so much meaning behind it. And each lyric is so purposefully done. Each element of the song, the instrumental, everything is just so particularly done with so much thought. And I think it drove Ian a bit mad because I'm very particular. But yeah, I'm very proud of it. I'm very, very proud of it.
Well, it's interesting because that reminds me of something I read about you, is that from the get-go, lyrics were important to you. You've always had this thing for lyrics. So what gave you, who were the artists, or what were the songs that kind of made you focus on lyrics?
I remember listening to Arctic Monkeys AM. Okay. And I know for true Arctic Monkeys fans that, it's an album, but for me, it was my first dive into noir. And then similar time, Lana Del Rey's Ultraviolence came out. And they are all just so heavy and dark and noir but gorgeous. I mean, so melancholic and had this beautiful tone to it. And that made me appreciate so much beauty in that. And I think they're very striking. And I think probably from there, and then I delve in more with Licky Lee and like Tuvlo and artists that really have such intense words and poetry.
Because this is I think your own description of yourself, sad boy. You make sad boy music. So what is it? And then this is, I mean, you mentioned people like Lana Del Rey who do this really well. What is it about kind of the more difficult things of life and the more challenging things in life that interest you in a way, especially to explore as a songwriter?
I think it has meaning and it has emotion. I can't write anything happy. And it's not a lack of trying. I think when I write something happy, it doesn't feel authentic. And I'm not saying that sad feels more authentic. I think it comes from a place where it has to have meaning. I think it just has that raw emotion. And I think you can really play with that euphoria more with that kind of style of music, I think. But in saying that, I'm getting more and more influences from, I've been listening to a lot of R&B and hip hop actually. And that's really influencing the current music I'm creating, which will be, a wee while away, but I'm very excited for that as well. I think every project is a huge lesson, I think, as well. And I'm learning as I go, just what I like as well. Because when you sit on the tracks for so long, I recorded it November last year and they're not even out yet. So I've had a lot of time to listen to them and be in that world, and I love it. And I've just learned so much from that world as well.
Final question, and we mentioned ambition very, very briefly earlier on, and now you mentioned people like Lana Del Rey that you looked up to, and then the people that you work with who work with Amy Winehouse. And where is your ambition? What is the dream? If we can make it sound like that, I know. Yeah. What is the dream in a way? It sounds a bit corny, I suppose, but what is the dream?
I think it's an important question, and it's one that I constantly consider is it worth it.
Sure.
For me, I just want to be able to sit in a house and play the piano and write what I want to write and have the freedom to express what I want to express. And you've got to play the game to do music, and that's part of it. But for me, it's just down to the writing and to the creating. That's what gives me pure joy, and that's why I do it, and that's what I want to continue to do, and that's why I'm here.
Excellent, Jack. On those words, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for talking.
Thank you. Cheers.